Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 4th, 2020. When are we in? 21. Yes, good. All right. February 4th, off to a roaring start. I had a weird scare with the soundboard for some reason, which just froze up and went silent about 50 seconds before I was supposed to kick into gear for the show. But I don't know. It came back to life. Everything seems to be okay. No signal from anybody that, hey, where's the show or anything like that. In fact, already got the thumbs up from Justice, so I guess we're okay. Hey, we'll just count ourselves lucky. Okay, we go forward then. That's really the only choice at this point. Okay, so, we have birthday wishes to shout out, I suppose, as the kids would say, to my youngest brother, whose birthday it is. And my youngest brother is turning 400 years old today. And so, things are not looking up here. It doesn't do anything for me in terms of keeping me young. But all right, we're happy to have it happening. And wish you a happy birthday if you're listening. I know it used to be easier to listen back in the days when we commuted to places. But those days are gone now. We're in pandemic times instead. So, all right. Here we go. Plenty to talk about today. As usual, Greg Dworkin scheduled to join us, already assembling his raft of stories. We are into budget consideration in the Senate. We had budget consideration in the House yesterday, and the House is able to neatly wrap things up fairly quickly, as they often do with these things. The Senate, though, stuck in its lengthy, drawn-out, but time-limited consideration of the budget, which will include, of course, everyone's favorite, the Votorama, which I guess we enter into at some point today. And lots of explainers out there. I know Greg has a couple of them on, or at least one of them on tap for us to share. We can read through that if you like. If we're not discussing it during the segment, it's important to know, and it's something that the Senate is going to occupy its time with all day today. And also, because of the nature of the proceedings in the next day or two, the parliamentarian's office comes to the fore. This happens once a year at reconciliation, budget and reconciliation time, trying to figure out what's germane and what isn't, and trying to explain the Byrd rules to people, and when they can be bent and when they can be broken and how it can be done, and whether or not it's fair for activists, for instance, to consider a procedural vote to break the rules so that some specific priority can, after having been flushed out during the Byrd rule vetting, be allowed back in the back door, and whether it's fair to, let's say, expect that the senators of your favorite team will vote to overturn the rulings of the parliamentarian. It's not frequently done. It can be done and requires votes in significant numbers to do it, and rarely does anybody hold on to a partisan majority that large. But, it can be done, and will it, I guess, is the big question, and we'll explore that and see what it means if things don't survive the reconciliation process, and what other opportunities might there be to adopt either close substitutes or distant substitutes, or parts of the plan piecemeal along the way, compromised along the way, I'm sure. But we'll have a look there. And yes, impeachment still on the horizon here. It's hard to get too excited for it. It feels like it's a million miles away, and that might have something to do with what we are guessing is the foregone conclusion of the trial, anyway. Although, anything can and may still happen that could determine the outcome. There's still the wild card out there of will Trump show up at the trial and insist on actually having a speaking and arguing role in all of this, and it'd be difficult to see how they could prevent it if he was determined to do so. But usually he's actually kind of chicken when it comes to this stuff. Apparently he's been talked out of it like 5 times. So you might think, well, he's a very persistent guy. They keep having to talk him out of it. But there's never any reports on how easy it is to talk him out of it. And I suspect that it's easier than you might think. Anyway, there's always the possibility that he may decide to open his mouth or make use of some medium or another to make his views known. And the more he does that, the less likely it is that marginal Republicans or marginal supporters of his among the Republican senators will stick by him because he'll embarrass or shock them into having to vote the opposite way. But it takes an awful lot, let's say. Case in point, I guess, just in terms of the way the Republican mindset works on these things, the House Republican Conference met yesterday to consider 2 questions, essentially, which tells you just what a terrible spot they've put themselves in. They had to consider both the question of what, if anything, will we do about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her committee assignments. They really, of course, we ought to be talking about throwing her out entirely, but that's not in the cards with a 2/3 vote being necessary. And whether or not to chuck out Liz Cheney as conference chair. Is that what she is, conference chair these days? I think that's the title she's holding at the moment. And, I don't know. It's just difficult to summarize it any other way than they voted for the status quo in both cases. It's really quite astonishing that they ended up just totally paralyzed in all of it. And they also adopted some interesting, I shouldn't say that. It's not a change from the way they usually conduct business. But they held a vote by secret ballot. It's a change from the way we're used to members of Congress working, because there are no secret ballots, generally speaking, on most votes. But in conference, or as the Democrats call it in their caucus, they can set up different rules. Those aren't public bodies. So anyway, they gave everybody the opportunity to vote by secret ballot in the hopes that that might reflect the true feelings of the conference, rather than have them be influenced by politics and worries about people being primaried if they voted their conscience one way or the other. And to no one's surprise, they opted not to do anything about either situation. But at least that saves them from the ridiculousness of voting to stand behind Marjorie Taylor Greene and leave her in place on committees, but purge Liz Cheney from the party, to punish her for doing the right thing. And I think they all know it, and I think the secret ballot reflects it. Doing the right thing in voting to impeach Trump, and but at the same time stand behind Marjorie Taylor Greene for doing the wrong thing, for being a racist, anti-Semite, conspiracy theorist, possible QAnon assassin. So, what do we call that? It's a toss-up. I don't know how to tell you how to view those results. But Greg Dworkin is here, and we'll give him a crack at it. And 99% chance we'll agree with his view of it, and 1% chance that we will agree with it, but have to go to commercial before we say so. So, Greg, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I was just on Twitter before I came over.
All right.
And Laura Savino had tweeted, "What could you talk about for 30 minutes with no preparation?" And I tweeted back, "I'm about to find out."
I think I've seen questions like that before. I don't really know what people are aiming at getting with those, but I've seen similar questions.
That you don't really need prep to talk
right.
about.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a different question.
Well, House procedure, reconciliation, the bird bath. We're going to touch on some of those things.
I guess.
Because guess what? Today's Votorama. Good thing we did the show yesterday.
Yeah.
So, today's Thursday.
I like
Thor's Day
Wonderama.
by Graptharp's Hammer by the Sons of Warvan. You Shall Be Avenged Day. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene's vote is going to come up. But let's finish up on what you were talking about in terms of Liz Cheney. Fascinating things there. As you pointed out, statistical dead heat there with 145 to keep her and 61 to oust her.
Yes.
And one present, even in a secret ballot, one present.
You don't have to actually do that. I mean,
In a secret ballot.
yeah.
I assume that was McCarthy.
Oh, I guess so. Though that's so clueless. Don't be present. That's all right.
Yeah, now if it were the Senate, I would have said Tommy Tuberville because he just figured
Yeah.
out he was there, but no.
Present. I mean, I guess
Right?
it could have been Liz
but
Cheney.
here's the thing about it, right? Here's the thing about this vote. Before the vote, Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan were broadcasting to people like Jack Posobiec, however you pronounce his name.
Oh, yeah. I don't really know, actually.
We have the votes to remove Liz Cheney. We got her. We're going to get her. We're going to get her out. It's done. We are taking over. And then the vote happens, and she wins.
Yeah.
And remember what this vote is. It's a vote to get her out because she voted to impeach Trump.
Yes.
It's the House, so she actually voted to impeach him, not convict him. She voted to impeach him.
Yeah.
And she voted her conscience, and she did the right thing, as you pointed out. Now, she's a very conservative member, but highly respected. As you could see, she still survived this. She wanted this vote because everybody was dunking on her. Jim Jordan, along with Matt Gaetz, was saying, we got her out. Jim Jordan wants to be Speaker. I think that's why he's not running for governor of Ohio.
Oh, okay.
That's my personal view. He thinks he's smart enough to do this. But Kevin McCarthy has this problem because 61 votes in his
conference. Yes, their conference.
Always have to pause and think, is this the conference or is this the caucus? This is the conference. So 61 votes in his conference wanted her out. 61 votes are really pissed off that Trump was impeached.
Yes.
61 votes is a
Just.
lot of Republicans. The GQP. I mean, 61 votes thought Trump didn't do anything wrong. Or that what he did was wrong, but, party over country, however you want to look at it.
Yes.
Right? And so 145 said keep her, but that was a secret ballot. What would have been the result if it were on the record? We're going to find out today because the parallel vote is, do you strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committees? And Kevin McCarthy didn't have the guts, the backbone, the cojones, whatever you want to call it. He couldn't bring himself to do it yesterday. He couldn't. He just couldn't do it. And so the Democrats are going to do it for him today.
Yes.
And, what's Kevin McCarthy's excuse? I don't know about this QAnon stuff, which really ticks me off. If you don't know, fire your goddamn staff and hire somebody who does. What the hell are you talking about? This is your frickin' job to know.
Yes. And I did just see Talking Points memo has a story on it. I put it away for later in case we need it for reference. But he denies knowing what they are after having gone on the record 3 times condemning them. So,
exactly.
So,
the question on the table there is like, who are you trying to fool other than yourself?
Yes.
So, it was a terrible move. And now what happens? And I saw Casey Hunt shaking her head about this. I don't understand it, she said. I don't understand it. If the GOP wants to gain back power in the House, the road to Kevin McCarthy being Speaker or Jim Jordan, whoever it is, because I don't think McCarthy's going to be Speaker even if the Republicans win, and I'm not sure they will. But if they did, I don't know that he can pull
It's a hard question because they might not want an effective Speaker.
Yeah, hard to know. But, running against Jim Jordan, I think Jim Jordan would win. But the thing is that, he's in a position now where, as Casey Hunt was saying, the road runs through the suburbs. So how...
A lot of them do.
How do Democrats keep their majority? They claim that the GQP is inseparable from QAnon.
Well,
and if Kevin McCarthy hasn't heard of it, everybody else has. And so what do the Republicans do? They tie the GQP to QAnon by supporting Marjorie Taylor Greene and giving her a standing ovation.
Yes.
So that when the Democrats start running ads, which they are already starting to do, tying them together, what are the Republicans supposed to say about no, it's not true?
I should say that.
Christine O'Donnell, I am not a witch. Todd Aiken. I mean, this is that all over again. And the Republicans just handed this to the Democrats, and Kevin McCarthy did nothing to stop that. That's why we were talking yesterday about how he is so bad at his job. Now, the other part of how he is bad at his job is that had he removed her from committees, which is going to happen anyway, then his conference would not have to be on record one by one voting as they are going to be today, because today is not a secret ballot.
Right. Can't make that one secret.
Right. So, that was another question people had. Why can't the impeachment trial in the Senate be secret ballot? What would it take to make it there? That's another question for you later.
Yeah.
But, it's not easy. I think you need like 80 senators or somebody to say, yeah, it's okay. And that's not going to happen. But getting back to this, why on earth does Kevin McCarthy want his conference on record supporting Marjorie Taylor Greene? Stuff is going to come out just since yesterday. Jake Tapper had one. In 2018, Representative Greene approvingly shared a white supremacist video claiming that an unholy alliance of leftist capitalists and Zionist supremacists has schemed to promote immigration and miscegenation with the deliberate aim of breeding us out of existence in our own homelands. And this is what the UN wants all over the world. That was, it's like what? You think other stuff isn't going to come out? And other stuff isn't going to happen after Kevin McCarthy backs her and says she has my approval?
Yeah, I mean, she'll just continue with this nonsense. Sure.
Right? Oh, well, yeah, I may have been a Nazi, but that was like last week.
Okay. It feels like it's not that far removed in time. Yeah, I don't know how she plans to
What is he
shed
doing?
this.
What is he thinking? How does this work out to his benefit? He was able to get sort of a vote for Liz Cheney and support for Marjorie Taylor Greene in the same meeting, so it helps him for about 15 minutes.
He's a unifier. He's unified the conference, except for the 61.
Yeah. So, and the present guy.
Yeah, right. But that may have been him.
Yeah,
we don't know.
May have been him. So this was a remarkable performance
was.
and not redounding to his benefit. And then again, today is going to be the vote, and then that happens. Now, while this is going on, talk about other stuff coming out. Okay, Greg Sargent has, and again, this is going to be reflective of why this is such a huge problem for him and not one that's going to go away. Greg Sargent wrote yesterday, an ugly truth links Marjorie Taylor Greene to Trump, one the GOP won't confront. Okay. The common thread concerns political violence. In an important sense, both dilemmas are fundamentally about whether Republicans will unambiguously stand for the proposition that the temptation to resort to political violence is wholly intolerable in a democracy and has no place whatsoever in their party.
Wholly intolerable.
When we do a little bit on governments, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But the game Republicans will play, Greg Sargent writes, will be largely about obscuring the true nature of the choice. Okay?
All
And
right.
he wrote this before McCarthy did anything. Politico reports McCarthy is reportedly leaning toward punishment for Greene. That didn't happen because McCarthy has no guts.
Okay.
He privately prodded her to apologize for her comments, and apparently she apologized for some things in private at the meeting last night, but in public said, I will never back down.
Right, except for right here, right now. And don't tell anybody.
And Greg Sargent said that's amusing enough in its display of spinelessness, but the cowardice runs even deeper. If you read through numerous quotes from Republicans condemning Greene, they mostly focus on her lunacy about 9/11, mass shootings, and space lasers, but they don't say enough about the fact that Greene also endorsed the killing of numerous high-profile Democrats.
It is odd. That doesn't get mentioned.
It is odd. Republicans occasionally mention this, but not that often. The QAnon reference hints at violent intent toward Democrats, but the basic framing is the GOP can either be the conservative party or the party of nutballs. Right? But the fact is, Trump incited political violence, he goes on to say, and that's why Trump and Greene are allies. And then this morning, because that's the shot, here's the chaser this morning in AJC, Militia alliance in Georgia signals new phase for extremist paramilitaries.
Oh, a new phase.
Leader of
Great.
a private paramilitary group that provided security for Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said he has formed alliances with other far-right groups to advocate for Georgia's secession from the Union following the arrest of participants in the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. You know, if they didn't have guns, it'd be funny. The way patriots are
It's
now
still
being
kinda funny.
hunted down and arrested by fellow men and women who have taken the same oath has disheartened any faith I had in the redemption or reformation of the USA as one entity. Justin Thayer, head of the Georgia 3% Martyrs, what a name, said at a text
Wow.
exchange with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution this week.
Oh, my God. Vanilla ISIS, as they say.
Yeah. Thayer said the Martyrs have allied themselves
The
with fellow
Martyrs.
3%er
My God.
militia, the American Brotherhood of Patriots and American Patriots USA, a North Georgia group headed by
LLC.
Chester Doles, a resident who belonged to various racist and neo-Nazi hate groups before forming this new group in 2019. The combined groups will advocate for Georgia's secession from the Union through an amendment to the U.S. Constitution or through the collapse of the American experiment.
Sure. Yeah, all right, I'll go advocate.
So, Marjorie Taylor Greene's bodyguard detail? I mean, you know, so much that's wrapped up in this. Yes, the violence is real. Yeah, they're 3%ers. Again, there are links, but not the same, between Proud Boys, 3%ers, and Oath Keepers. The 3%ers are the wackiest of the group. The fact that they call themselves martyrs is notable. The fact that they basically are saying, I don't have anything to do with Republicans. I just want the U.S. to collapse altogether is notable. And the fact that they're
That's what the
linked to
3%
Marjorie
wanted.
Taylor Greene is incredibly notable. So, yeah, Greg Sargent is absolutely right tying this. And by the way, you know, who is the one who was advocating the riot at the Capitol on January 6th? That was Donald Trump, and he's got an impeachment trial coming up next week.
Yes.
So, you know, this is all part and parcel of the same thing. It's interesting that some of the experts on extremism are saying, be careful about elevating Marjorie Taylor Greene because you don't want to elevate QAnon. This stuff's already there. That genie's out of the bottle. I don't buy that. I know they're experts, but I
Yes,
just don't
I
buy
see what
that.
they mean, but-
You have to confront it. You can't deal with Joe McCarthy by pretending he's not there.
Right.
He's got to be censured. He's got to be kicked out. If you can't do that, you got to censure him. You got to confront this.
Yep.
And you got to confront this everywhere. In fact, there's a story in USA Today by Charlotte Clymer about confronting white nationalism and Christian nationalism, which is what this is, in the military, because that's the
great,
breeding
yeah.
ground for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
That's where the Oath Keepers come from.
Yes, generally speaking. I don't think they understood
That's
the
the oath
oath they're
talking
keeping, but right. Yeah. That was mentioned in the guy's speech, the new, 3% Alaska Martyrs. That they can't believe they took the same oath as we did. Well, the words were the same, but the brains that processed them were different, sir.
Right.
That's all I can tell you.
So this is Charlie Pierce writing in Esquire. Republicans have a major problem. Soon it could be everyone's problem. Kevin McCarthy's fumbling the Liz Cheney, Marjorie Taylor Greene situation. And again, they go hand in hand. On Wednesday, the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives got wagged by its tail on behalf of its mad dog elements. Yeah, we've overextended the metaphor, but what do you want? Charlie Pierce, has been locked up since last St. Patrick's Day, so give me a break.
Okay.
Anyway, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy apparently can be held up by mail, has been jacked into pairing up disciplinary actions against both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Liz Cheney. Obviously, this happened just prior to the vote itself. Now, from NPR, Trump's actions that day earned him another rebuke from the House. The first time in history, president's been impeached twice.
Okay.
That we know. 10 House Republicans voted alongside Democrats to impeach him. One of them was the number 3 House Republican, Cheney, who said in a statement ahead of the vote, there's never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution, but backlash against her was swift, and many in her party called for her removal. Trump loyalist Matt Gaetz even went to Cheney's home state and urged the constituents to vote for her. Oh, yeah, that makes it even sweeter that he thought he knew how to count votes, and he's not Nancy Pelosi, and no, he can't. But McCarthy has passed the peak of his efficiency as a zookeeper. The Democrats in the House have noticed this, and they've fitted McCarthy for a meat suit to wear into the lion enclosure.
Okay. Why is
That's what's going to happen today.
Right. Kevin Gaga in his meat suit. Great.
Right, exactly. This is government by talk show and Fox News. There's nothing remotely equivalent between what Marjorie Taylor Greene has been spouting her entire life and anything Representative Omar even has said. Why that? Because there's 4 or 5 people like Ronnie Jackson, Brian Babin, Jeff Duncan, Jody Heiss, Andy Biggs. They want to pass an amendment that any condemnation of Marjorie Taylor Greene should be substituted with Omar.
I think that will fail.
I suspect that will fail.
Lots of, the false equivalent martyrs brigade is out for that one, right? Anybody that, because you're, essentially what it comes down to is, well, you are removing Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committees because she says something you disagree with.
Oh, well, yeah, well, what about you?
Right. But, well, it's so much more than that, I don't know. Who knows what's going on in their heads? But basically, they view it that way. It's a disagreement, and so therefore, we should be able to remove somebody that we disagree with. But then again, just brief reminder, you're in a minority and you're not allowed to do anything. The end.
Right. So Charlie Pierce writes, I'm not sure I agree with him here. For all the problems I have with Cheney and her old man, she's authentically dangerous in a way Marjorie Taylor Greene can only dream of being. Well, militias make her pretty dangerous. Oh, yeah, she is not a member of the same political phylum as MTG. The gravitas deficit is profound, but McCarthy is unable or unwilling to use that to his own advantage. Nobody's under control in that party, and that's going to lead to a kind of general dysfunction. It's going to guarantee there's going to be more MTGs, which will lead to less control, which will lead to a kind of future in which the Kevin McCarthys will find themselves lost in a sea of empowered insanity, and that's going to be everybody's problem. So McCarthy is paving the way for Jim Jordan to be minority leader.
Yeah, that might be true, although the results of the vote, 60 is an alarming number, but it's also a distinct minority, and
it's
reminds
just the beginning.
Yeah, could be. I guess it's more than, say, Ted Yoho got for speaker, so I guess the numbers are growing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we should pay attention
Or
to
after
that.
the break on that.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us, and we're still floating on the raft of stories, aren't we?
We are. I'm surprised that more Republicans don't say, yeah, well, what about Tulsi Gabbard? She's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And she's a Democrat, She's said some weird, wacky things.
That'd be better. But they like those things. That's the weird thing. I guess that's why they're not upset about it.
That's why they're not doing it. So Evan Siegfried, who is a Republican strategist, has a piece here on CNBC.
All right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's abhorrent views present a serious problem for the GOP, Republican strategist says.
Is he that strategist?
And helpfully, little talking points here, key points are made, so you don't have to read the whole article.
Oh, good.
But Evan Siegfried told CNBC that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, which is, by the way, the way Nancy Pelosi described Kevin McCarthy as Q California.
Yes,
in her press release. Her abhorrent views present a serious problem, and the talking points are simply this. The House of Representatives will vote Thursday on a resolution to strip Greene of her committee assignments. Today is Thursday, Grabthar's Hammer Day, so that's the day it'll happen. The steps to remove Greene from committee assignment come amid widespread criticism for a series of extreme remarks that she made before winning her congressional seat. Not only do they force the Republican Party to say whether or not they agree with them, cue those ads, It's a different kind of cue, but they are a gift to Biden and the Democrats because they do not allow Republicans to effectively communicate their message opposing Biden's agenda.
Yes, okay, I see.
Biden, in fact, has an agenda, so that's my segue. That's my pivot, my presidential pivot,
the day you
to talk a little bit more about Biden and reconciliation and what's happening now.
All right.
Wasn't that clever?
Yeah. I don't follow.
The clever thing is not to tell yourself it's clever when you do it, but there you go.
Right, it's like
Marcus Johnson, who is a political scientist and writer, had a couple of tweets that I saved because I think it's true. He says, I look at democracy as essentially a power-sharing agreement between factions in exchange for systematic stability. In order for it to work, factions must agree on rules, basic facts, legitimacy of system, and trust. Bipartisanship helps all these things. And that's why you have these rules before you go ahead and vote on contentious things, like stripping Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committees. So that rule was yesterday, and today is the vote or something like that. Committee was yesterday.
Yes, Rules Committee, considered a rule for the bill today, and the vote will be today. I think that's what we're at.
And that's exactly what Marcus Johnson's talking about.
Okay.
And he says, in our case, bipartisanship is impossible because one party has gone off the rails and become an extremist conspiracy party, which is bad for democracy. So how is this all working out? First AP poll of the Biden administration out this morning shows the new president with a 61% approval rating. A bunch of polls, a bunch of old polls from yesterday, I think we may have covered some of them, all show that the Biden agenda is really popular. All right. A majority of Americans say they have at least some confidence in his ability to navigate the crises facing the country. And so Axios takes that information and says this. President Biden told Republican senators he's got an open door and an open mind on his coronavirus plan, but he already has the votes and overwhelming support in the country. Right. Why that matters, says Axios? Well, power matters. Biden holds all of it.
Thanks, Axios. Yeah, okay.
And then they say the next part, which I think is the more important part of it, get used to this. Democrats are gleeful as they watch the media fixate on family feuds inside the GOP, echoing what Evan Siegfried said, except on the other side, while Biden pushes out executive orders and pushes through this bill on his terms.
Yes.
So everybody is seeing this. Everybody in Washington is seeing that while the Republicans fight amongst each other and label themselves in a bad way for the midterms that are coming up, while all of that is happening, Biden is really well positioned.
Yeah, all right. So far, so good.
Right? Biden embraces the reality that the two numbers that matter most to his presidency are coronavirus cases falling and the economic growth rising. And by the way, economic numbers are actually starting to look pretty good, at least in terms of what future expectations are.
Okay. Well,
Steve Ricchetti, counselor to the president and longtime Biden confidant, was in the Oval this week for meetings with Republican and Democratic senators and told me the president reaffirmed and deepened his explanation and commitment on the numbers and the substance. In other words, he welcomes fine-tuning, but he's going to do it his way.
Sure. Why not?
Line. Democrats will dismiss any whining about Biden's stimulus as D.C. noise or Republican hypocrisy, and they'll be right on both fronts.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm not too worried about that.
So Biden's in a good position here. So now comes the actual reconciliation. And to that, I turn to the experts, you being one of them. But the other, one of my favorite experts, and I think yours too, is Sarah Binder.
Sure.
And she writes, everything you need to know about reconciliation in a mere 1,000 words. Bottom line, keeping 50 Democrats on the same page could be just as hard as taming the bird rule.
Okay.
And essentially, what's this all about? Well, the presiding officer historically relies on the parliamentarian's advice, and this is when the parliamentarian becomes like really famous. Nobody knows who the hell the parliamentarian is and what they do until now. I mean, the people in the chambers do,
everybody
but
writes
the public
the features
until now.
It's the same features last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Presiding officer historically relies on the parliamentarian's advice to determine bird rule violations.
Right.
Senators can challenge a ruling, but it takes 60 votes to waive the bird rule or overturn a ruling. This will likely be problematic for Democrats who must find ways to make nearly $2 trillion in spending and tax matters consistent with the strict limits of the bird rule. If the chair overrules a provision out of order, Democrats would need to find 10 GOP members to join them in voting to overturn the ruling, assuming Democrats remain united. Now, the bird rule sets a 6-pronged test of what counts as extraneous.
Yes.
Okay, so this is where, and I think the vote-a-rama on this may even start today with the first one. That's what Debbie Stabenow said today on TV.
That's what everyone's saying.
This is where the English words extraneous and germane wind up getting thrown around.
So exciting.
So you can't do anything extraneous, and if you want it in, you have to deem it as germane or not germane. And we'll hear that, and then you turn to the parliamentarian, and then you vote on it if you're arguing about it. So maybe they work this out, maybe they don't. But if Democrats are united, that's good. And if the parliamentarian doesn't like it, then you fire the parliamentarian and find somebody who does, but that's messy. And so that's the spectacle we get to see.
Yes. True. And if you're wondering about the odds of that, very often, you usually think about this and say, well, Senate being now in Democratic hands, it's about that time when parliamentarians get replaced anyway, since has been held over from the Republican majority. But the issue with this particular parliamentarian is she was the Republicans' parliamentarian because she was held over from the last Democratic majority. So
right, and in theory, they're nonpartisan.
Yes,
in practice, you have to tell us whether they are.
Holdovers are very common, true, but occasionally there are at least threats. But this particular instance, it becomes, I guess, slightly more difficult. But on the other hand, then also very frequently people say 12 years as parliamentarian is kind of enough.
Right. Well, parliamentarian may well say that.
Right.
So
that's also true.
Right. That'd be funny, because Nancy Pelosi turns to the parliamentarian and said, "What do you think?" And the parliamentarian said, "I'm sick of this. I have had enough."
Right. There's a lot of grooming of assistants in that office, and I've got plenty of good ones. Pick any one you like. Right. I'm going to. I don't know.
So Sarah writes, applying the law can be tricky. Senators typically try out their arguments for the chamber parliamentarian, a Senate staff member, who gives the bill a so-called bird bath.
Yes, I hate that.
To scrub provisions she advises violate the bird rule.
Right.
So again, these are terms you're going to hear thrown around, and this is what they mean.
Nothing.
But what do you mean it's a bird bath? It means a parliamentarian didn't like something and said we can't do that. Well, now what? Well, we either have to change the way we do it, or we have to have a vote on it, which in this particular case you're not going to get. You're not going to win because Republicans are going to try to stop everything.
Yes, in all likelihood.
So you have to be clever. And so some things will go and some things won't go. For example, one of the first things that might go because it doesn't survive the bird rule, I'm told, is paid leave.
Okay.
It just doesn't fit. It's not germane. It's extraneous.
Yes.
It doesn't really affect the budget in any way, and therefore is not proper to do under reconciliation. That's the kind of thing that may wind up coming up.
Yeah, that does happen. And, the real game is trying to suss out which ones did the proponents believe from the beginning would be purged from reconciliation, but just put it in there to say, I fought for it, but we lost. And how much does that matter to you?
Right. So, in other words, it may be, for example, Biden says he wants to do bipartisan stuff, and everybody's laughing at that. And what does that mean? It means just doing what the Republicans want. They got nothing. Fine. Mm-hmm. But this might be a situation where to throw the Republicans something, a provision may come up, fail the bird rule, get a bird bath.
Yes.
The Democrats say, oh, well, not our fault. It's parliamentarian. Don't yell at us.
Yeah.
And so you get stuff done that doesn't look like you get stuff done. Wink, wink, nod, nod. The guys in the room are all, patting each other on the back, and you don't even know that happened. And so there's going to be stuff like that happens. And the question is it on something important or not? So to finish off the way the process works, because, I'm very process-oriented when I don't understand the process. And, folks, that's how come I spend so much time picking David's brain, because he knows about all this stuff. And usually it doesn't matter, but once every couple of years it does, and today is one of those days where it does. Second, a presiding officer typically follows the advice of the parliamentarian who provides counsel based on relevant precedent. That reduces uncertainty for senators and lessens any perceived partisanship if the chair decided to make a ruling. But nothing technically binds the chair to heed the parliamentarians' advice.
That's right.
Even if ruling contrary to past precedent would bend if not break a durable Senate norm, the presiding officer could rule a Democratic provision kosher under the Byrd Rule, thereby shifting the burden to Republicans to muster 60 votes to overturn the ruling. Mm-hmm. So you could turn that 60 vote around and say, well, it's not like we need 60 votes to say yes. You need 60 votes to say no. Well, wait a minute. You can't do that. Yeah, I can because I have the gavel.
Yes. And it's confusing because it's rarely employed in that way, and we're used to seeing, what you really need is, and people sometimes think this is the rule. It usually strikes me in first impression that the rule is, if you didn't read the rules, if you want to do something out of the ordinary, you need the 60 votes to push the Byrd rules out of the way, because that's what's usually happening, because the parliamentarians' ruling is usually adhered to. But yeah, if you just go the other way,
that's where usually is doing a lot of work. So the presiding officer is who? Harris?
Well, if she shows up, she will be. But whoever the designee, it could be anybody. If Harris doesn't show, then the prerogative falls to Leahy as Senate President pro tem. But generally speaking, sitting in the chair presiding over the session in the Senate is viewed as menial work, something of an indignity. They give it to the most junior member they can convince to do it.
Which is good, because Leahy has to preside over the impeachment trial, so it's just as well he's not in that chair.
He's resting, yes. I don't know. Well, he may
for the optics.
Right, but they, people, they rotate, they take turns, and they take turns in the House too, but it's actually considered something of an honor for some reason.
Right. Well, if you're going to be on TV, maybe people will like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the presiding officer could rule a Democratic provision kosher under the Byrd Rule, thereby shifting the burden to Republicans. But ultimately, the Byrd Rule is a tough hurdle for a majority seeking to avoid a filibuster. Even tougher is getting and keeping all 50 senators on the same page. Well, we've talked about that ad nauseum about Sinema, who hasn't said a peep, and Manchin, who has. But the fact of the matter is the vote was 50-49. So far, the Democrats are doing a pretty good job in herding cats, and what's helping them is the Republicans being the GQP and supporting people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So that's where we stand, and that's why Axios is saying, you know what, for all of the Storm and Drang, the Democrats are actually in a pretty good position, even though they have the slimmest of majorities. For right now, that's all they need.
Yeah, well, okay. We'll see
they can get this done in some form. What we don't know is what the form is going to be.
Right, yes, and I wish I remembered the exact line from out of Ghostbusters for that's appropriate to that. What form is chosen here, but okay. One day I'll remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's one throwdown just at the end of all of this, again, to remind people where the public stands. This is John Harwood writing. The new Quinnipiac poll that came out yesterday's news, on how Americans view Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan. Democrats 97% support, 3% oppose. Independents 68% support, 25% oppose. And Republicans 37% support, 47% oppose. That's pretty good from the opposition party. And that is what John Harwood calls a bipartisan coalition. Why is it a bipartisan? Because we said it was, and these numbers support it. And if you don't like it, you're going to need 60 votes to overturn my opinion. So too bad. Shut up and sit down.
Okay. I like that part.
Yeah. So, they're in good shape.
Good. All right. Oh, here's the Ghostbusters. All right, we've got it. Whenever you say what form it's going to come in, the answer is that of a giant slore. In case.
Right. And so Sarah Binder also mentioned things that we mentioned yesterday. Again, just so you're familiar with these terms, Senator Schumer promises to dramatically increase the number of floor amendments and not regularly, quote, fill the tree, end quote, on bills to prevent them as part of the new organizing resolution, which, by the way, is now official. And Democrats, in fact, run the Senate now.
Yes,
that would be a big change and one applauded by senators of both parties. Amendments have been missing for years, and Sarah Binder says, does vote-a-rama count toward Schumer's more amendments commitment? Because we're going to see a lot of suggestions today. And the answer is no, but he can make it yes.
I guess so, look, right. I mean, so far I've allowed a lot of amendment votes, but here he's forced to.
So what? These are the facts. Don't argue with facts. Right, well, what's going to happen next? Well, we'll see.
Yeah, well, I I imagine he'll stick by it until something really dangerous presents itself, and then they'll say, well, for this one, I said I would fill the amendment tree less, and this is less. And if it turns out in the end to have been more, then what can I tell you?
Can you give us a quick explainer of what filling the tree and the amendment tree means?
We'll do the Axios version of it. Why it's important. What it does is effectively limits the ability of any members, majority or minority, to offer amendments. That basically Senate bills come up for amendment and they're considered often section by section. And what you can do, there's a weird parliamentary trick that the Senate rules don't allow anything beyond what they call second-degree amendments. An amendment of an amendment is something that's permissible in the Senate. So what you would do, but you couldn't amend an amendment to an amendment, a third-degree amendment. You get the idea? So that's the general concept. What you do then is you say, I will offer an amendment to a whole section, or indeed to a whole bill, a manager's substitute. My amendment seeks to replace every word in the bill with these words in the bill. And very often they're the same words, perhaps with one or two things changed. So if you offer to substitute to an entire bill, then there's your first degree amendment right there. The whole bill is covered. No one, and you're then able to amend parts of the bill as a second degree amendment, but you couldn't amend an amendment to a part. So to fill the amendment tree, you would offer a substitute bill, which is the same thing basically verbatim as what was in his existence, and then offer an amendment to that amendment, whether that's one section or presumably, I guess you could do the whole bill again. And then the tree would be filled if you did it to the whole bill. And no one could offer any amendments because any amendments that are offered next would be amendments to amendments to amendments, or third degree, and therefore out of order. So because the majority leader gets preferential recognition from the chair, the first thing that can happen in bringing a bill to the floor is that the majority leader can offer an amendment to the bill and then an amendment to the amendment and fill the tree and make everybody else's proposed amendments into third degree amendments and therefore out of order. He's promising not to do that, I guess, at least very much. Something that
for the moment
they all
at least
usually promise. It's like the promise now, we're going to go back to regular order. You'll recognize that.
Whatever that means.
Right.
So that's really all I got. So as Laura asked, what could you talk about for 30 minutes with no preparation? Well, I just did. Oh, but let me offer you two historical quotes that help put that in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Woodrow Wilson said, if I'm to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. If 15 minutes, 3 days. If half an hour, 2 days. But if you want me to talk for an hour, I'm ready now.
Yeah. I feel the same way.
Right? So we can get into this. Or Mark Twain from Connecticut, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one.
It's all about organization and editing.
Yeah, something along those
lines. Are the hard things. Right.
Yeah. So remember, we had a longtime listener who asked us, what kind of preparation do you guys do before the show? And David and I metaphorically looked at each other and said, preparation? You could do preparation? Who knew?
No idea. Yeah, if you do that,
that's a great idea.
It's tough. Right. You spend the whole day doing it, though. Right. But we hear that all the time. It comes out in the form of us saying, well, there's so many directions we can go in. I don't know what to do. So we'll just, we'll see where we go.
We'll just do this.
Right. Stream of consciousness. How long can you do that? All day.
Oh, 2
Aren't
hours.
you conscious most of the day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, you've done one.
With all of that, so that's what to look for
in
the next few days and for today. And so, familiarize yourself with those very important terms: votorama, filling the tree, germane, extraneous, and then also be aware that vote on Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to put Republicans on the record. Exactly what they didn't want. Thank you, Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
And with that, we'll see what happens between Thursday and Monday. We'll have the very difficult task of summing up 3 or 4 or 5 days in just a short period of time. But it's not the Trump administration anymore, and we are getting back to regular order, and it's a little easier than it used to be. So we'll see where it goes.
Right.
Anyway, David's got another hour of the show and a few extra minutes as well. And who knows? We'll see where that goes.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate carrying us through most of an hour with no preparation. And it's a good thing I didn't ask you to prepare, or you would have been out of here 10 minutes ago.
An hour and 10 minutes.
Right.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay, very good. We'll see you then, and try and take a guess between now and the end of the show Friday on what you'll be talking about over the weekend, so that we can tell you on Monday whether or not that actually happened. I guess that's really the whole point of the show. Never really boiled it down quite that way before. Okay, so yes, vote occurs today on Marjorie Taylor Greene's committee assignments. We haven't really discussed it, or rather, I haven't seen anybody discuss it in the press, in the media, whether there are any possibilities, and I gather that there's not, because usually they're pretty good at vote counting, of significant numbers of Democrats saying, nah, I really don't think it's wise to strip her of her committee assignments. There is this possibility. The argument that's hanging out there, the best chance Green has of retaining her committee seats and Republicans have of retaining, of allowing her to occupy them. Because by the way, I don't think that this means that they will lose seats on the committee, but I haven't really seen any commitment about that one way or another. But I would imagine that the regular expectation here would be for Democrats to say, Republicans, you retain that seat for your party on that committee, and you can appoint another different Republican to that seat. We're not going to eliminate that seat, but they do have that prerogative. They can do that, but I imagine that whatever agreement there was ahead of this controversy with respect to the ratios on the committee will still remain in place, and that they'll be able to choose a different Republican to put there. And but that nomination or that assignment will still have to be approved on the full floor of the House through a resolution. But as we saw last Thursday, a week ago today, very little attention is often paid to that, and they very frequently go through by unanimous consent because there's an agreement ahead of time. This is how many seats you'll have, and you divide them up as you see fit. And that's really the root of the problem here. That's why we're back here having this fight, is Democrats think it's unacceptable that Republicans saw fit to put Marjorie Taylor Greene anywhere. On the other hand, as I've discussed at length, Democrats were not exactly proactive in making that view known, and that's due in part to the fact that most of the Democrats in the House and most Democrats around the country are busy with other things and didn't concern themselves ahead of time with what extremists in the Republican Party were doing and saying, and which ones of them might have compiled records sufficient to have a real shot at building support for excluding them from committee assignments. There are others. The public case just hasn't been built for them to the extent that it has been for Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I think there's even some quantum difference between what she's done and what even Lauren Boebert has done. They've both been outspoken and strident, but Boebert, I don't know. I mean, I don't think she's actually less crazy, but she's actually less grating and abrasive, and has been less active in compiling a record too. She's not as big a YouTuber, as far as I can tell, as Marjorie Taylor Greene. But it may be that I'm missing. I haven't done any review of her record myself. I'm relying on other people's review of the records. And those who have been doing the most reviewing have focused on Marjorie Taylor Greene, and probably for a reason. Anyway, she finds herself singled out here. But Republicans will probably be allowed to keep that slot on the committee and just assign some different Republican to the Budget Committee and to the Education Committee. And they very well could come back and say, well, it's going to be Lauren Boebert. Haha, just to troll you. But she's already on the Budget Committee, so they'd have to come up with another name for that one. And I don't know whether she has any interest in the Education Committee. I don't know why she wouldn't. She's got kids, right? I'm sure she'd be happy to say that she's interested in education all of a sudden if it meant trolling Democrats. But they also might say, well, there are other Republicans who are more important to this conference than Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, they are supposed to both be junior, the most junior possible backbencher members. And that's part of the danger here, is that Marjorie Taylor Greene has risen to a place where she, too, could conceivably challenge Kevin McCarthy for his power. That's not ordinarily something that would be contemplated for a brand new, a new first-term member. But it has to do with, of course, latching on to Donald Trump and latching on to the QAnon conspiracy that has such fervent supporters out there in crazy land, but also the fact that McCarthy is such a cipher and an empty suit. So he's set himself up for this. Anyway, they'll get to choose new members for that, and I suppose that too will go through eventually by unanimous consent, unless they choose, unless they're looking for a fight and they choose, Boebert and who knows who else. But even then, it may just go through, because still nobody's objecting to Boebert's committee assignments, even though they very well could. So the vote will come, and Republicans will have to go on the record as to whether or not they are for keeping her on this committee or not. And I guess it's entirely possible, though, that some Democrats may take her threat to heart. She has made the threat on behalf of the Republican conference, and I'm not certain that they're behind her on this. But the fact that they opted not even to have a vote in the conference meeting yesterday. They had a vote on Liz Cheney, but didn't even ask for a vote in conference on Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she still comes out ahead, and they still give some indication of being more willing to punish Cheney than her. So that's something of note, too. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I want to continue with this, although I don't really necessarily want to linger on Marjorie Taylor Greene. But it is an important point to note that, so in yesterday's conference meeting, they had the two issues to settle. Do we get rid of Liz Cheney? And they had the secret ballot vote, which tells you something about, one, about the courage of Republican members, and two, where their minds are when they don't have to be personally liable for the record they leave behind. On the one hand, you look at it and say, wow, 61 Republicans are so hardcore crazy that they actually thought it was a good idea to vote to replace Liz Cheney because she did the right thing. And really, obviously, you kind of have to impeach Trump in this situation, but crazy Republicans, 61 of them, say not only do you not have to do that, but you should be punished for doing so. It's one of the weird twists of the secret ballot, though, is if there were, if it was an open vote, and again, I guess I should point out that very frequently the votes in conference or for Democrats in caucus are by secret ballot, but very often people speak up to the press when asked and will tell you how they voted. And you have, if you take their word for it, you can sometimes get a pretty good picture of how the lines broke down, but not everyone will go on the record and tell you what their votes are. But very frequently, reporters will stake out a meeting and then try and ask people how they voted on their way out. They do an exit poll, essentially, and if they tell the truth, then you get some accurate picture of what went on, but they don't have to. But yeah, very frequently, one of the paradoxes of having the secret ballot. On the one hand, it frees members up to say, yes, I have been publicly critical of Liz Cheney because I think my constituency demands it. But in reality, I think she did the right thing. Or it could be, in reality, I think she did the wrong thing, but I can't I don't look forward anyway to setting off a power struggle within the Republican conference at this point. If we actually unseated her as conference chair, we would need to elect a new conference chair, and I don't really see any reasonable successors out there that I think would be successful in the role. So I'd rather just keep things the way they are, but thank God it's a secret ballot because I promised my constituents I was against Cheney continuing. So you can't tell whether it's, okay, I tell my constituents one thing, but really she was right, or the slightly less, I don't know what to call it. I was going to say less ethical, but I guess it's really no less ethical than I told my constituents I was against Cheney, and I am against Cheney, but I'm also against Jim Jordan, say, taking over, or I can't imagine at all who would take over, and that's bad for the stability of the party, and I'll avoid that. So that could be, and that could easily have been McCarthy's position too, is he could very well have told people either openly at that meeting or privately ahead of time, I understand your concern with leaving her at the head of the party, given how you felt and still feel about the impeachment. But the alternative of having a knockdown drag out at this point when we're already in disarray is much worse. So we're going to have a secret ballot anyway. You'll never have to own up to your vote one way or the other. Let's go for it this way. The other possibility with the secret ballot, of course, is that among the 61 members, there are almost certainly several, and a good chunk of them, if not the majority of them, who probably thought the numbers will be much bigger for removing her. We might even actually succeed in removing her, or come close anyway. But I certainly thought that the vote would be closer, and it turns out that that's not the case. And as it turns out, I'm much more significantly in the minority here than I originally thought. And given a second opportunity to do this by a secret ballot, the numbers might have been even lower, where they say I'm wasting my vote. And I actually see the point of looking like a unified conference. I just thought I didn't want to get caught on the wrong side here, and I misjudged, and I thought that the majority of the caucus was going to vote to remove her. But if I knew that it was going to be the minority and that it was going to be pointless to cast my vote there, I would have cast my vote with the majority. You can never tell. But I don't know. I don't know how much time you want to spend parsing that, trying to figure out the minds of Republicans. And they just might not have one among the dozens of them that gave any thought to this vote in the first place. So anyway, there they are. But it is worth pointing out that I guess we can refine the position I staked out at the beginning of the show, which is that they voted essentially to have it both ways. They didn't vote on one of them. They voted to have their anonymous cover-up for Liz Cheney, but they didn't. I thought that they did, but they didn't even call a vote over Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I don't know how they thought that would come out. But my guess is that there are also a large number of Republicans, and a couple of them are on record as saying so, saying, "Look, I don't agree with what Marjorie Taylor Greene does. Can we just get down to calling her Marjorie Greene at this point?" Or she's got initials that work now. Like AOC, she's going to have MTG, but no, that doesn't draw any similarities between them. They just have, everybody's got initials. It's just, I don't know, some combinations of initials make sense as nicknames and some don't. MTG kind of works. Anyway, Greene, what was I going to say here? There are many members who say they disagreed with her, even vehemently, and that what she said was inappropriate and that she doesn't belong on any committees or in Congress, probably, but that they disagreed with the procedure here. In other words, that it has always been left up to the party apparatus to decide how to allocate the seats that they're afforded by the organizing resolution, and that it sets a dangerous precedent for the majority to come in and edit the minority's work here. The precedent, of course, being as Republicans shout now that Ilhan Omar, and name any other members that you want to target from their side, ought to have lost her committee assignments as well for what they consider to be the anti-Semitic comments that she's made, or what they consider to be anti-American comments that they've made. And neither of them, I don't think, are fair judgments, but you're talking about Republicans here. And so the implicit threat from most members, and the explicit threat from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's not in a position normally to make these threats, to speak for the conference as a first-term backbencher member. But the threat is, well, one day the Republicans will be in the majority again, and lots of people are worried about that because the margins in the House are very slim now. I don't even know offhand what it is, but it's like 10, 12 votes difference between the size of the Republican conference and the Democratic caucus in the House. So the next elections could very well flip control of the House for various reasons, and all of them actually need to be discussed at some point. The one that we can do less about is, or discuss less about anyway, is the historical pattern of the midterm elections usually turning to the advantage of the out party, the out of power party. But that usually comes down to the out of the White House party. In divided government, it's harder to tell who's in and who's out. But here, of course, Democrats control both houses of Congress, at least nominally, and the White House. So the out party here is the Republicans, and traditionally speaking, midterm elections go in the favor of the out party because people, I guess the political scientists' usual theory is that voters are looking to, impose some sort of a check on the power of the presidency and the majority in power party. But that theory makes less sense in modern context very often. I don't know. It's never really made sense to me, especially when there was divided government, when the party in the White House was different from the party in control of one or both houses of Congress. What's the idea? How are you checking the power? You might check the power of the presidency by giving a larger majority to the other party in Congress, but why aren't you checking the power of the majority power in Congress? It's a co-equal branch. I don't know why that doesn't get checked either, but anyway, I've always thought that the checking thing was kind of dumb, but a lot of voters are kind of dumb. Maybe they buy into it. I don't know. But I think the better explanation for it is not so much the check on power as the honeymoon ends for the party in the White House. And then, that can last up to a year, perhaps, depending on the circumstances. But the second year in power is when you begin to really start to see the bumps in the road, and people get tired of, having to criticize the party in the White House. And it's really actually more about the party vying for control of the Congress, being able to now have a track record of 2 years to lay traps for and to criticize in the campaign. And that usually pays off at the ballot box. But I think more important, and probably worth a longer discussion, though perhaps not on this day, is the fact that we are also now going to be having our first elections post-census, the decennial, is that the right word for it? Decennial census every 10 years. The census last conducted, of course, during 2020, and in some cases in controversial fashion under the Trump administration. They were doing everything they could to guide the Census Bureau to conclusions that would be most favorable to Republicans politically. Of course, you know that the results of the census are what determines how the, for whatever reason, we're still keeping it at this number, 435 congressional districts will be allocated among the states. States that lose population tend to lose seats, lose representation in Congress. And states that gained in population will absorb those seats. And then the district lines will need to be redrawn to accommodate this. Even in states that haven't lost or gained any population, they very frequently will take the opportunity to redraw congressional district lines. And we all know about the gerrymandering practices. And especially now we know more about the very highly sophisticated, highly technical, highly granular data being used to drive these redrawing, this redrawing of the districts in many states. And in the case of, for instance, of North Carolina, where we recently got a hold of the notes of a recently deceased redistricting expert for the Republicans who left behind notes including things that you should never write down, like I am a partisan Republican and my job, as I see it, is to draw districts such that the advantage for the Republican Party is at its zenith. Is that the right word? Zenith. In the way I draw these lines, to maximize the number of districts that are either guaranteed or virtually guaranteed anyway, or that lean very heavily in favor of Republicans, so that we can send as many Republicans to Congress as possible. And in some cases and in some states, North Carolina, we just know more about the nefariousness with which it was carried out. But we see the results in places like Wisconsin, which I think is probably the most heavily gerrymandered, not only for congressional districts, but it starts in the state legislatures, where if you can gerrymander your way to overwhelming majorities in the state legislature, then they can take advantage of that partisan advantage to draw the most advantageous congressional district lines, because that's where redistricting is typically done, in the state legislature. Some states have adopted reforms. Some of the reforms, high-minded and well-meaning though they may be, are in fact quite dumb and hand over too much power to people who have abused it for a long time, in the form of supposedly independent redistricting commissions. And even if they don't hand power back to Republicans, sometimes it's just unwise, I think, to not exercise the power yourself. After many years of partisan abuses by Republicans, say in Virginia, in drawing Virginia's congressional districts, the opportunity now exists for Democrats to do the same, but high-minded Democrats very often, and trolling Republicans say, well, is that really what the Democrats want to do, having taken power? Shouldn't they take this opportunity to make things more fair and even-handed? Isn't that what Democrats ought to want to do? And I guess in one sense, yes, that's where I want to land. I would like the arc of justice to bend in that direction, yes, but one of the things you might have to do to get it to bend in that direction is bend it really hard right now in partisan form and say, let's take things back towards the center by, well, for the moment, overcorrecting in favor of Democrats. And then, after 10, 20, 30 years in a row of unfairly favoring Republicans, if we had 10 years unfairly favoring Democrats, you might be able to convince me to say, all right, I don't need to do 30 years like the Republicans did. Maybe I will feel that way after the first 10 years, but chances are you might be able to have a conversation after 10 years of Democratic dominance that we say, all right, maybe now we'll put this in the hand of an independent commission. Anyway, where were we even going with all of this? I can't remember. Oh, yes. No, it didn't help me either. Okay. Well, anyway, this is, I really don't remember how we got to this. That's one of the dangers of, it's the downside of not organizing the show. You can talk forever, but sometimes you talk yourself down a path that you forget how you got here. And you're going to go back and back onto the path that you were on before, because there was something we needed to talk about. All right. Well, anyway, I know we sort of started this with the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, and Republicans deciding to have the vote on Liz Cheney but not have the vote on her. And so now, so we come now to the vote in the House about this thing. I think we were talking about process. That there were Republican members who said, I disagree with her, but I don't think that Democrats ought to be able to dictate to us how to discipline our members and which members we ought to get rid of. That needs to be up to us. I was going to say that was an argument offered up in the Rules Committee last night. The Rules Committee was, of course, they get every bill that's bound for the floor passes through in the House side through the Rules Committee, where they decide on what the rules of debate for that bill will be. So in their consideration of this resolution removing Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committee assignments, and as we mentioned the other day, this is a resolution drafted by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We should note for the record that Johanna Hayes had a resolution that did exactly the same thing, but for whatever reason, and it might be just seniority, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, more senior member, higher ranking inside the Democratic caucus, it ends up being her version of the exact same bill that gets considered on the floor. Johanna Hayes could, maybe she's co-sponsoring Wasserman Schultz's bill once she saw that that's the one that was moving. I don't know. But that's always an interesting side story. It's always be interesting to find out from her. What do you think? How do you feel about what happened here? The fact that you had this idea and you might even have had it first. I don't really know. We can tell by the bill number that got assigned to it which one came in first. And they're dated as well, so you can check that out. But anyway, so now they move this bill. So it's Wasserman Schultz's bill. It was being considered in the Rules Committee, and one of the Republican members of the Rules Committee commented during the debate that she disagreed with Marjorie Taylor Greene and really thought maybe she should be perhaps removed from committees, but that she ought to have been removed by Republicans instead. And that was prior to having the conference meeting, of course, after which I guess then you could come back and argue with this member if you wanted to have more discussion about it and say, well, you said that you thought that the Republican conference should take care of it, and they've now had the opportunity to take care of it, and they have declined to. So if you really don't agree that she belongs on committees, then you ought to be voting for this resolution. But I imagine the answer would be, well, what I really meant was that I think that the Republicans should make the decision. Now, if a majority decides that they want to keep her on those committees, then so be it. I lose. But it needs to be up to Republicans, not Democrats. Yes, now I remember how we got down this branch. Because of the threat. The threat being, well, if all these other things work out, either the voters decide to check the power of the party in the White House for whatever dumb reason that obtains, or we are able to take over the House because we have redistricted in key Republican states such that we've increased our numbers, and the margins being so tight as they are right now, just 10, 12 votes between the two parties in the House, it wouldn't take very much in very many states for us to be able to simply gerrymander our way into a majority. It would be a narrow majority, true, but if a majority is what it turns out to be, then they'll take advantage of it. And the threat is, well, now we, as the majority party, will dictate to the minority party, now the Democrats, who they can put on committees. Or we might just limit them to, I don't know, 1 Democrat per committee or 0 Democrats per committee. Somebody did comment on Twitter yesterday, how long will it be before, the natural conclusion of this is, look, members of the minority don't have much voice. There's not much to do for them in the House of Representatives. Their role is to be there and lose and remind everybody that Republicans, or in this case, the minority has representation. They just don't win very much. but they sort of legitimize the whole operation by just being there. But since they can't, without consent of at least some members of the majority, have any real impact on legislation in committee, why have them around? All they do is ask bothersome questions and troll us in hearings and embarrass us by holding us to account. Why don't we simply eliminate their membership entirely? I don't know how long it will be until we get there, but I guess you probably could get there. So the threat was that they would do the same and that they would start excluding people, perhaps like Ilhan Omar, or for that matter, they may go further. Rashida Tlaib, AOC herself. Just why? Because she's annoying and we don't like her, or whatever it is, whatever their excuse may be. They could do that. That is true. Of course, that opportunity has always been available to majorities to do that, and they have never dared to do it. But the Republican argument now goes, well, you've never dared to do things this way either. Even when it was Steve King being removed from his committees, it was by direction of the Republican conference. The Republican conference opted, through whatever mechanism, to remove him. That is to say, I don't know whether they had a vote, secret ballot or otherwise inside the conference, or the conference leadership simply said, we're imposing this on Steve King, and that's all there is to it, and we're going to offer a resolution. But then a Republican resolution is brought forth on the floor and perhaps adopted by unanimous consent, but it's still Republicans making the call. The idea that Democrats should make the call is what was bothering this one particular member of the Rules Committee yesterday. I should probably find out who it is. And I might even have put the story aside in pocket, but I think it was probably contained in somebody's tweet, so it'll become more difficult to identify the source here as we go along. But anyway, I'll see if we can't dig it up. But my own counter to that, by the way, at least during the Rules Committee meeting yesterday, was, look, you still have time to do the right thing. I mean, the bill language is right in front of you. You're reviewing Debbie Wasserman Schultz's resolution to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you believe that she should be removed, but that it should be Republicans to do it, then why don't you just say, I'll tell you what, I am offering my own resolution, and I think the rule should make in order my substitute resolution, which does exactly the same thing and removes Marjorie Taylor Greene from the committees, except I'm a Republican and I'm doing it, and I would be okay with that. But I noticed that she did not make that offer. And that's because, of course, she knew she might not speak for the Republican conference and that Republicans might not, in fact, support that bill. But then again, knowing that Democrats would accept it because it's the same outcome and have the vote of the sponsor of the bill, presumably, as well that makes it a bipartisan result and something proposed by Republicans. But see, that would fix the situation and lay the blame on Republicans, and it would end up backfiring. See, she's only in favor of removing Marjorie Taylor Greene if it's a Republican idea. But if it's a Republican idea and it's the idea of a Republican that isn't in sync with a majority of Republicans in the House, well, that means I am going to end up getting in trouble, and I'm going to be the one that gets targeted. I'm going to be the one about whom they're having secret ballot votes at the next Republican conference. Like Liz Cheney, she would be doing the right thing and then facing the possibility of punishment for it. And this person is no Liz Cheney. She could find herself in quite a lot of trouble and, I don't know, maybe booted from the Rules Committee, because that's still considered a prestige committee, even though in the minority on the Rules Committee, you're beaten up even more regularly than you are on the floor as a member of the minority. Anyway, the point is that it was an empty argument that I'm for the substance of removing her from the committees, but opposed to the procedure. Well, if you're opposed to the procedure, give us a better procedure. That's a good point. I've changed my mind. I have to go now and then go vote in secret ballot to do none of the things that I said I really would support here. You get the idea? All right. Let's see. Our next break is coming up, and it leaves us with one segment to discuss all the rest of the stupid things that are happening in Congress on both sides of Congress. That's our both sides for you, the House and the Senate. But again, even today in the Senate, boring day, but you do get to see the vote-a-rama at some point. I don't think we enter into the real vote-a-rama part where people are just calling up amendments and voting on them instantly with no debate until much later in the process. I think they have a couple, what do they have, like 20 hours, 50 hours of this before they get around to the vote-a-rama part, but stay tuned. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've got the answer for you. It's Republican Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, with whom I am just not familiar, but she apparently a member of the Rules Committee. I thought I saw her name I think it was somebody else who was on the Rules Committee, but who used to be on the Ethics Committee and was resigning from the Ethics Committee just as part of the regular reshuffling there. But Jackie Walorski, according to the reporting of Sahil Kapoor, who covers politics for NBC News, he was watching the Rules Committee hearing, and Walorski said she was opposing the House vote to throw Green off of the committees, saying, "I'm not here to defend Representative Green. I'm here defending a process." So she wasn't necessarily saying that she agreed with the idea that Green needed to be stripped of her committees. She just wasn't going to defend her. She may vote in her favor and probably will in the floor today, but that's all we can tell for sure. But anyway, she was saying, "I'm here to defend the process." Sahil then noting, "Expect many Republicans to take this line and pin it on a principle of parties picking their own slots, as opposed to being any sort of defense of Green." That's true, of course, but as I said, there was still time for her to do the right thing. The bill that would remove Green from the committees is sitting right in front of you. Just steal the text from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, put your name on it, sign it, and drop it in the hopper, come back to the meeting and call the Democrats' bill moot and offer the substitute that you had dropped in the hopper. But she didn't opt to do that. Speaking of mooting of things, let's see. I saw this in flipping around through my own timeline. Very often there are some stories that I think are of some importance and comment on Twitter, but don't park in Pocket. But what the hell? Since we just were talking about rendering a argument moot, we've got another one here. I saw Ryan Anderson, who is, I don't know who he is, just generally speaking, a checkmarked kind of fellow on Twitter, making this interesting comment. All right, we'll take a look at his Twitter bio here. Ryan T. Anderson, president of EPPC DC, which is what? I don't know. Let's see if we can open up the profile. Ethics and Public Policy Center in DC. About which I know nothing, but just in case you were wondering, they're DC's premier think tank dedicated to applying the Judeo-Christian moral tradition to critical issues of public policy, which sounds like might be just so much gobbledygook, but okay. Anyway, Ryan Anderson, in addition to being president of EPPDC, and also the John Paul II Teaching Fellow at the University of Dallas, founding editor of Public Discourse, which I imagine is a publication of some kind, and then noting all of his fantastic credentials, like where he went to college and where he got his PhD, which is always a little pretentious, but you can look it up if you want. The statement from EPPDC colleague Roger Severino, who sued President Biden yesterday, it was 2 hours ago when he had written this thing, for the legal eagles. This will be very interesting to watch the legal argument that Biden makes to justify this. What is this? Well, we'll take a look. The screen grabs here are, read as follows. A little under 2 hours ago, I sued President Biden in federal court seeking to prevent him from removing me, that's Severino, from the Council of the Administrative Conference of the United States, or ACUS, Administrative Conference of the United States. This before the expiration of my 3-year term as provided by law. See the attached complaint. So he's got a real complaint here. As you may recall, I do not, I was head of the HHS, Health and Human Services, Civil Rights Office from March of 2017 until January of this year, and I was appointed by President Trump to the ACUS Council in August of 2020 and reappointed in January of 2021 when he was almost not president again, right? I am proud of my service in both capacities. Who cares? ACUS is an independent and historically non-controversial federal agency composed of experts in law and regulations who study administrative procedures in federal agencies and recommend improvements. I have been an active and valued member, says he, of the ACUS Council since my initial appointment, and there is absolutely no cause for this attempted removal, and no reason has been given by President Biden or his staff, despite my asking for a justification. Notably, the Trump administration did not terminate any Obama-era ACUS appointees before their terms expired, and I believe this is the first time in ACUS history that a president has attempted such a move. President Biden's attempt to remove me contrary to law exposes his lofty promises of healing and uniting all Americans as nothing more than cynical manipulation. Because I am not one to be bullied, not even by the president himself, I will not resign my duly commissioned post and look forward to seeing how President Biden tries to justify his vindictive actions in court. Signed here, Roger Severino. And then there's contact information and all of his credentials and blah, 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 and Ivy League, et cetera, et cetera. And Ryan Anderson thinks it'll be very interesting to see how the legal eagles justify this. My own comment is this. What if I don't justify it? What if I instead drag the appeals out for 3 years until the end of your term and then ask the Supreme Court to declare your case moot because your term has ended anyway, and what's the big deal? Now, you would say, well, that doesn't count because I didn't get to serve in my 3-year term. He kept barring me from the, from the conference room, and until my case was settled, it was presumed that I wasn't a member, but I am a member and I was entitled to a 3-year term and I should get that now. Yeah, but then again, emoluments got mooted just the other day, like the Supreme Court threw that case out, even though Donald Trump has been keeping the money the whole time. How is that moot? I don't know. And will the Supreme Court see it that way? And probably not. Well, we mooted that one because it was good for Republicans, but we won't moot this one because it's bad for Democrats. So therefore, it's not moot. So you can't tell whether you're going to get the same result. You probably won't. But I just thought it would be fun to contemplate that, and why not? That leads us to another story proposed by Rebecca Romans here, who asks, is this true? And if so, I hope Biden does it. I'm not that familiar with these sorts of administrative appointments and what the rules are, although generally speaking, yes, it's true that the law very frequently indicates that the president either can't or at least very strongly ought not to be making firings like this, and that people appointed, particularly to these short 3- and 4-year terms in office, and that it's usually better to let them ride it out. But very often there are hidden provisions in the same law or in others that are equally operative in governing administrative appointments that say, well, under certain extraordinary circumstances, replacement or firing is permissible, and the question ends up being a fight over whether or not the circumstances are extraordinary enough to trigger this sort of exception. What's she pointing to? She's pointing to the tweet of Jill Lawrence. Jill Lawrence is, well, because we better check in on that, commentary editor and columnist at USA Today. And so it might be her own piece that she's tweeting around here because it's an editorial from USA Today. Joe Biden can deliver USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, from Donald Trump by firing his joke of a board. And people who have been waiting for the comeuppance of Louis DeJoy, who, as Postmaster General, agreed to help manipulate the mail system itself in favor of Republicans' political prospects, though it's questionable how much he was actually able to get done on that front, but he certainly scared the hell out of everybody on this. So let's take a look at what the editorial board has to say over at USA Today. Again, you heard it. Joe Biden can deliver the USPS from Donald Trump by firing his joke of a board. Our view, the subheader summation says, pick up mail delivery by rescuing the U.S. Postal Service from the politicization and poor leadership of under Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. And the body reads, as much as the U.S. Postal Service has struggled with profitability and on-time package delivery in recent years, most Americans could expect that a check in the mail to pay, say, a heating bill or the mortgage would arrive on time. No more. Got a bill back, my mortgage payment, and said it was late last month. Detroit resident Lucy Johnson complained to NPR. I know I mailed it 10 days in advance, and they still charged me a late fee. Americans are fed up, the subheader reads here. The Postal Service has gone from bad to worse to awful under Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, an acolyte of Donald Trump and a GOP megadonor. Americans are fed up, said Bill Pascrell, Congressman Pascrell from New Jersey, urging President Joe Biden to take action. It's time to clean house, and top leadership should be replaced. And that might not be such a bad idea. DeJoy was mired in controversy from the start, brought on last summer by the Postal Service Board of Governors, acting under pressure imposed by a Trump administration controlling the purse strings for a badly needed $10 billion loan, if only a Band-Aid for what the debt-ridden agency needs for solvency, they note parenthetically. DeJoy immediately launched a series of cost-cutting strategies without any impact analysis or much guidance from field offices, or for field offices. Utter confusion followed, resulting in a significant drop in the quality and timeliness of mail delivery, an inspector general later found. Under court order and immense public pressure, the Postal Service managed, to its credit, to process record numbers of mail-in ballots during the November election. And remember, many people thought the plan was for them just simply not to. After that, however, mail delivery went over a cliff. A busier than usual holiday season loomed. The workforce was exhausted and depleted by coronavirus exposures and infections, and backlogs mounted. Through the end of the year, only a quarter of the first-class mail was processed on time in some areas of the country, and periodicals and marketing deliveries were even worse. Nationally, only 64% of first-class mail was delivered on time around Christmas. Letters were taking weeks to cross the country. I think I've experienced some of that myself. And by the way, hey, for my brother whose birthday is occurring today, protecting your privacy. You know who you are, of course. The birthday card is late because Louis DeJoy, right? Mm-hmm. Not me mailing it Monday or whatever it was. Okay, totally that guy's fault. As we said, letters are taking weeks to cross the country. Americans received late notices and penalties for absent bill payments and had to fork over stop payment fees for missing checks. Coupons arrived after windows of use closed, and nonprofit fundraising pleas showed up after the tax year ended, according to the New York Times analysis. It's been genuinely awful. Dave Lewis, president of Snailworks, which tracks mail delivery for businesses and nonprofit groups, said of the Postal Service. You could change your name and not go with the foregone conclusion there, but okay. They are slowly digging out. They're better than they were in December, but still, in a lot of areas, delivery is badly delayed. Critics complained that the Postal Service was prioritizing package delivery over mail to fend off FedEx and UPS competition, but that's misguided if true. Frustrated consumers of first-class mail always have other choices, do they? Okay, like what? I'm probably going to start paying bills over the phone. Okay, that's one. Possibly paying them online, Anna Benson of Plain Township, Ohio, told the Canton Repository news outlet. I'm going to try to use the post office as little as possible. So that would be bad news for them. The result is that the centuries of affection most Americans have had for the U.S. Postal Service is tarnishing quickly, if not irreparably. The agency has suffered financially for years from declining mail usage and, more recently, from unwarranted federal requirements to pre-fund pension obligations. We know about that. The House of Representatives has passed legislation to repeal the mandate to prepay retirement benefits, and the Senate must now do the same. In the meantime, the politicization and poor leadership of the Postal Service has grown intolerable. Beyond the hiring of DeJoy, the Board of Governors is led by a former Republican National Committee chairman, tapped by Trump. Biden can fix this. While the president can't legally replace DeJoy, he can fire the board members, all appointees of a president who maligned the Postal Service by calling it a joke. The board members Trump named certainly sat idle while DeJoy's incompetence dragged down agency performance in the middle of a pandemic. By statute, board members are pledged to, quote, represent the public interest. That hasn't happened. Moving them out and DeJoy thereafter would truly serve the public interest. It's an interesting argument, an interesting perspective. Can it happen? I couldn't tell you because it's not an area I have studied closely enough to know what the legal outcome is likely to be. And certainly there will be Trump-appointed judges out there who might feel compelled to defend DeJoy in some way because he was Trump's choice. But I don't know. Now that he's out of power, maybe they don't feel quite as compelled to do so. But it will certainly generate court cases. Their court cases might not be as strong as Roger Severino's, but I don't know how strong Roger Severino's is either, because that too, I don't know what the statutes are regarding appointments to the, Administrative Conference of the United States. But generally speaking, the trend of late in the courts has been to give an enormous amount of deference to the president as the unitary executive executing his policy preferences. So we'll see whether maybe that's the best thing to happen. The best thing to happen to the imperial presidency is electing a Democrat to the White House who has to clean up an awful administrative mess left behind by a saboteur president, but who also has left behind his own appointments to the federal bench, who, if they are still interested in for whatever reason in defending him in the legal arena, they might need to do so by adopting new precedents limiting executive power, which a lot of people could certainly argue and have argued has been overextended of late, and ironically overextended of late very often by Republican presidents having their cases brought in front of Republican appointed federal judges and usually in the context of fighting the global war on terror or whatever. And even when it's not in that context, that somehow gets brought into the arguments anyway. And another round of the expansion of the power of the imperial presidency, as critics call it, has sort of floated through at the hands of Republican presidents and their Republican judges. And, it's not gone without criticism, certainly from Democrats, too, and criticism that very often would hold true even if there was a Democrat in office. There'd be a lot of people who would be willing to see presidential power curtailed, even under Joe Biden or any other Democrat for that matter, but not just yet, because Republicans have known this for a long time and have been embedding their political appointees in civil service jobs that are supposed to be protected from political whims in order to avoid this sort of situation. But it's meant, of course, to be protecting people who were granted those jobs, one, through civil service selection and not through embedding political appointments, and to be executing them in good faith. But, the protections are there, right, in order to protect people who are doing their jobs in good faith. And if you're not doing that, then the basis for the protection would at least logically disappear. Whether it legally disappears, we have yet to find out. All right. Let's see. Other things that we might want to round up and consider. A couple other things that Rebecca had brought to our attention. And, we never did get around to Bill's morning tweet here, although we got to the subject of it. Was all about whether or not we would see Marjorie Taylor Greene removed from her committee seats today. So we certainly spent plenty of time about that, or on that subject. What else have we got here? Rebecca had a couple of suggestions. Republican officials discover what happens when your health insurance is tied to your job. And we get the sad trombone womp womp here. That's the way Corey Lewandowski spelled it out. But there's more womps in that particular version of the trombone than I've got. But let's see. What do we got here? She's got her own. Oh, look at this. This is interesting. Is this... Okay. At first, I was sympathetic to these Trump officials who didn't get their full paternity leave, but then they kept talking. Interesting. This the tweet of, Commie Girl 1 on Twitter, Rebecca Schoenkopf, who sends this Politico piece around. Trump aides made a late request to Team Biden to extend their paternity leave, their parental leave, and they said no. Isn't that awful? So apparently they were almost stating a sympathetic case, but then they kept opening their mouths and made it worse. The Trump political appointees said they were surprised they were turned down. The White House says they shouldn't have been. Let's get the gist of this article. Seems like an interesting one. After 4 years in the Trump administration, Vanessa Ambrosini was looking forward to 3 months of parental leave when she and her husband welcomed the baby a week before Christmas. The Commerce Department's Human Resources Office had given her approval for it, but then she was surprised to find out the benefit was no longer available because of the change in administration. I got completely screwed, she said in an interview. There were no caveats in the language saying anything about if the administration turns, you get nothing. And of course, that happened, and so I got nothing. Ambrosini is among a number of ex-Trump political officials who lost their parental leave when Joe Biden was sworn into office. It's a byproduct of the field they're in. Their boss, the president, may have been the one let go, but his departure has meant that they too lose their jobs and benefits. So it's not so much that you lost leave, it's that you lost the job that you were on leave from as well. And guess what? The leave is a function of your job. It's a benefit that's attached to it. Now, if it was a federally guaranteed benefit that was independent of your work, you're right. Then you would have been able to hold on to it. Still, they argue that the Biden administration should have honored their leave by keeping them on the payroll until the end of it, a request that emails reviewed by Politico show the Biden transition did not grant. Boo-hoo. The Biden White House declined to speak about the issue on the record, and instead an official noted anonymously that political appointees do not enjoy the promise of federal employment past the end of the administration in which they choose to serve. The official blamed the fact that the Trump administration dragged its heels on a quick and orderly transition as a reason why some on his team were caught off guard by the benefits ending. We understand that a few Trump appointees, including a handful currently on parental leave, submitted last-minute requests to remain on government payroll, the official said. Because these requests were received so close to Inauguration Day, there was no way to implement an exception to the rule in a way that is fair to all outgoing employees, including many who resigned as expected without making requests for extraordinary benefits. The official added that appointees have been advised that they have options, including COBRA and the Affordable Care Act. For Ambrosini and others, those options were not enough to navigate an already difficult situation. Former Trump officials face an uphill climb finding a job in Washington, D.C., where the federal government is run by Democrats. Job searching while you're at home taking care of an infant is nearly impossible. With a newborn baby, it's not like I can just jump on the job market and be like, hey, I'm ready to work. Ambrosini said, it's hard. No one's going to be willing to hire me right this second because I'm still home with the baby, so it's tough. Yes, well, I gather that it is. You get the idea here? I'm curious about whether there's anything in particular that's super egregious down here, but I think we get the gist. I'm already feeling less sympathetic toward them without even reading any further. But in case you're still unconvinced, you can take a look at what is in this Politico piece. I'll include it in the roundup. And if I spot anything even more egregious at some point, we can discuss it later on. Let's see. What other things have we got here? Yes, well, more on Marjorie Taylor Greene. But this one you will likely have seen. And, of course, I guess all of it becomes moot shortly. I don't even know when they're having this vote. I think it actually doesn't happen until the afternoon, if I recall correctly, from the Majority Leader's office email from yesterday. But just in case you wanted more ammunition on this point, yesterday's big story on her was it turns out that she was the moderator of a Facebook group that featured death threats and racist memes and shared a wide variety of conspiracy theories and also endorsed the John Birch Society. That's true, and I think a lot of people circulated that story yesterday. And she had an awful lot of time on her hands for a busy small businesswoman, don't you think? And yes, I think this two stories, one of which I think we might have discussed with Greg off the air during one of the breaks, but we've mentioned Lauren Boebert earlier today. She now faces charges or allegations anyway, that her campaign, I think, reimbursed her for some ungodly amount of mileage on her car during her campaign. Now, this is a fairly common thing to do. The candidate drives around the district to campaign events, etc., and then will reimburse themselves out of the campaign funds. But, yeah, I'm not seeing the report here. All of a sudden it's become difficult to find. But at any rate, the basics was that she had, I think, claimed something like 32,000 miles in, I guess in one or another or several of her personal vehicles during the campaign. And the problem is that, of course, we were campaigning during a pandemic, and there were very few, if any, public events listed on her calendar. There was just no way. There weren't enough events to drive 32,000 miles. And it's a pretty significant reimbursement that you're claiming. Tens of thousands of dollars in mileage there. And I guess it's been pointed out that in order to have racked up that kind of a mileage, and especially without even having events around the district to go to, you would have had to drive around the circumference of the entire planet to rack up that kind of mileage. And I'm doubting that she did that. So we'll see whether that sparks any further inquiries into what she's been up to. And I guess one other point. which I'll make rather quickly as we exit here. Rebecca said she thinks it was 55,000 miles. I thought it was in about the 32 range or something, but I'll find you the tweets about it anyway, and we'll see if we can't nail a number down. The other story, which I think will come up perhaps in the impeachment context, I saw a different report of this, but she's pointing me also to something from Crew. I've got a report from the Huffington Post that makes a similar argument. SV Date reporting that Trump raised $76 million post-election, basically on the premise that he was going to need this money to fight all of the election outcomes in court, and of course that he was also going to be backing the two Republicans in the runoff Senate races in Georgia. So he rakes in $76 million and basically spent zero of it on either of the Georgia Senate races or in funding any of the court challenges that he said his lawyers were filing or that people were filing on his behalf. He spent none of the money. They did spend some money paying for a contractor who helped him with more fundraising, but he's basically pocketed the whole thing and walked away from it. That'll become very interesting in the impeachment trial if his argument is, well, I won and this rally was about fighting for the win. Well, you had $76 million to fight with.
From networksradio.com.
And you spent zero of it.
You have been listening to
Even you don't
Kagro
believe your
in
argument.
the morning with David Waldman.
And that's it for today. We obsessed once again over Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I'm hopeful that subject ends, at least for the time being, with today's vote. West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up next. Justice Putnam will round up everything that we neglected today. It seems to be his lot in life, but that's what makes it such a great show. We're glad it's there. Stay tuned.